Welcome to the podcast, Brad. We're glad to have you.
Hey, I'm excited to be here, man. This is great.
Awesome.
It's great to have a fellow Aggie.
Absolutely, huh?
Aggie, it's great.
Great education. And I love learning all that we can about HR.
For sure.
Now, we were talking about this a little bit, but let's dive into your just growth history in HR. Now, all of us listeners, we're HR, so we know you're not interviewing for anything, so you can give us a little bit more and more fun background on your history. How's that?
Sure. Oh, that's great. Well, I started out, I actually did an interview on campus at Utah State Utah State University with First Security Bank, which is defunct now, but I worked for First Security Bank right out of college. I started as a specialist in recruiting and staffing, and was there for a few years, had a short stint with a software company, and then I worked for Fidelity Investments for 3.5 years. And that was a great experience. Again, that was staffing and recruitment and a little bit of HR. And then I had an opportunity to come to Idaho, which is where I live now, and do an HR and safety position. So it was HR manager, safety manager. So that was my next step in the career, out of the specialist realm into more of a generalist role. I was there for a few years, and then went to the largest cheese and whey manufacturing company in the U.S., Glanbia Foods, and had several HR roles there. Senior HR manager, OD manager. So I managed all the training and development. I managed a 50+ person management trainee program and internship program. So that was a great opportunity. I was there for about 9 years. And through that whole process, I was gaining more certifications. So that PHR launched my certification, or launched my career with that certification. And then later I took the SPHR, I took the GPHR along the road, SPHRi, and the CPTD, which is an ATD training and development certification. And so those helped me along the way. And then I kind of came to a pinnacle in my career where I wanted to kind of do something different. And I also wanted to work from home. And I happened onto a 6-year career opportunity with HRCI, HR Certification Institute, which certifies HR professionals all over the world. So I went from an HR career at doing all aspects of HR into a business development role, but with HR professionals. And so that was a great opportunity to go make that jump, that leap from HR to business development. So
I love that.
Yeah. So now I'm on to different things. I'm actually writing a book. It's called Good Works, and it's about goodness in the workplace. So that's
hey.
These days. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. So this is perfect. Love that. Yeah. And congrats.
No, thanks. I appreciate that.
Okay. I love your perspective. You have a bunch of companies in your resume, and you're with HRCI, which is huge. And by the way, Glanbia, I just spoke in Idaho recently with somebody who works with Glanbia, and she's in charge of getting speakers. So it's like, oh, small world. Great. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Now, what would you say is your favorite part of HR?
My favorite part, honestly, it's a toss up between employee relations, which is dear to my heart. I love talking to employees, trying to figure out how to make work just a great place for them. But that launches also into training and development. If people can see a vision of how they can move forward in HR, training and development can help them get there. But also just the day-to-day, how do you manage your career, and how do employees manage their careers and advance their careers depending on what they're doing. So I would say employee relations and just training and development in general, just developing people. I love that part of it.
Well, good, because this podcast is called Reach Your Ultimate Potential, and that can mean promotion, or it can just mean our human need to grow, right? We could grow into something else, consulting or a new business or whatever, or it's just, hey, I'm in my role, but I want to continue to grow.
Right.
And the angle, for lack of a better word, that we take is, how do emotions play a role in you reaching your ultimate potential? What would you say?
No, that's a great point. I think it's integral in your development and in your success in HR. You know, I love Emotional Intelligence, that book, and honestly, the book that I'm writing really is about that. So, if take goodness for example, and that's really the subject of the book. How do we maintain goodness in the workplace with kind of the nastiness that happens in the corporate world?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've worked in HR and other realms for 25 years, and I have had employees come to my office in tears and spending an hour just crying because they were treated poorly by this manager or this coworker, et cetera. And it really loses a lot of productivity. It's a challenge for them. So the goodness part is, how can managers, how can leaders really inspire employees to do great things? And let's take all that nastiness out of it, right? Let's take that ego. I feel like I need to be that mean manager to make people be productive. Honestly, that, talking about from an emotional perspective, if you're treating people that way, productivity goes down. Companies aren't effective. Teams aren't effective. They're not accomplishing great things if people just aren't able to be their best selves at work. And honestly, I don't want to leave my goodness at home because I feel like I can't compete in that nasty environment. So, I mean, the emotional part of that is, let's allow people to bring their goodness to work. Let's not beat people up for being nice. You've heard the nice guy thing, never, finish last. It's not true. And so, the emotional part is very key. As a good person with goodness, if you want to be a good person at work, it takes some emotional fortitude to do that, to say, fight for what's right, fight for goodness, and not just roll over because you're a nice person.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of emotion that's wrapped up in that. We got to be strong.
Exactly. Okay, so for the benefit of the listeners, tell us what nice person means.
What nice person? Well, so there is the story goes back to a manager of a baseball team back in the, I think, 40s, who there were 8 teams competing for the pennant, and they were in a baseball field, and I think he was talking to a reporter, and he said, "See that team over there? It's filled with nice guys. They're going to finish 7th, or they're going to finish 7th out of 8th." But the ultimate story, I mean, it came out with nice guys finished last, which is not true. It's just not. So I would say the definition of nice is not someone who is the doormat or gets run over or just, does whatever people want them to do. It's not nice to let people do wrong things at work, for example. It's not nice to let people treat other employees in a poor way. Nice is having courage to stand up and say, we got to do this in a better way. We can be kind at work. We can be nice at work, but it does not mean being a pushover. I talk a lot about that in my book.
Gotcha. So let me see if I understand. Nice, some people think, okay, I have to be nice because I want people to like me. But if I'm doing that, then sometimes I'm going to let people walk all over me. And I've learned termed a different way that helps. You can be kind. Kind means you still respect people when you're telling them, maybe you're disciplining them or you're reminding them of the rules or you're enforcing something. But at the same time, you're getting things done as a manager, right?
Exactly.
And then another thing that I was reminded of, I went to a SHRM conference a couple of years ago. I wish I could phrase this perfectly, but hopefully the idea still comes across. Yes, a lot of managers think you should fear me because I'm the boss. Now that is an old way of managing. It comes from a lot of old, cultures and stuff. From an emotional standpoint, anger hides fear. And a lot of managers are new, and they internally think, I have no idea what I'm doing. and they want to report good numbers to their boss. So to hide their fear, they use anger, and they say, why the heck didn't you get your job done? Why aren't you fast enough? Why are you in my office? Why are you crying? Why are you talking to me? And that can explain why people come off that way.
No, and I think that's really true. And I have another example in the book where I work for a company, and the CEO, or one of the leaders of the company, I should say, one of the two leaders, he would get himself worked up to fire someone. So imagine you're the person getting fired, and you're losing your job, your livelihood, right? Basically, at least temporarily. And this person walks in and gets up and starts yelling at you and telling you how horrible you are, and this is why you're getting fired. So that why bring that emotion into it? And I think it's hard for me as a manager to fire someone, so this is going to be my reaction. But look at the effect you're going to have on that person that's being let go. So yeah, to your point, I think in our society we have to force ourselves to be mean. Why do we do that? And to your point, or we're afraid of something, and so our reaction is meanness, and it does not work in long term. You'll see sometimes when people use that kind of bullying mentality, or even if they don't mean to, they feel like, well, results will be driven by this type of attitude. In the long run, in the long term, you might have some short-term gains, but in the long run, employees check out, they leave, or they quit in place. It does not inspire people to be productive or be great employees. It just doesn't.
Exactly. So let's talk about you, if you're okay being vulnerable for a second.
Sure.
Let's talk about your ultimate potential, how you want to reach it, meaning what does that look like? And then we'll talk about how emotions come and play a role in your life.
Oh, that's great. So I believe my potential and my opportunity here is to put this book out that really will help people with something that I struggled with through my whole career. And I'll tell you just a quick story of how my journey, a little bit part of my journey. When I was younger, I worked as a teenager for a realty company. I did painting, I did yard work, all kinds of things for that. And my boss above me was excellent, but the CEO was just mean. He was just a mean person. And honestly, I swore after how he treated us and everyone in the company, I would never get into business. I am not going to do this. And fast forward to when I started my HR career, and I was struggling with, coworkers that were in it for themselves, just nasty to other people. You couldn't trust hardly anything they said, and that's the challenge in business sometimes, is who can you trust? You hear all the time, well, I don't trust anyone in business, and I don't think that it has to be that way. So I was struggling with this. Do I turn to that and be, that backstabbing coworker that everyone either despises or fears, or can I be a good person at work and have goodness and move forward? And so this CEO passed away, and I went to his funeral because I just had to see, what is the result of that type of living your life in that way. And frankly, people struggled to pay him a compliment. But what really stood out in the funeral was there was a colleague of his in local government that she hated him because the way he treated her too, and everyone else around him. But he did in one moment extend the olive branch and say, "Is it your intention to be mad at me forever?" Because she was not happy with him. And she said no, and she said it opened the door to them forming a good relationship and a good working relationship, and they actually became friends. And so that inspired me going forward to how can I keep my emotions, speaking about emotions in check when people are treating me poorly, and how can we all reach out to that person and work with them, and even possibly form a friendship with people that just their main goal is about them. And so that inspired me moving forward. And that's how I've tried to live my life and my career. And honestly, I have had a wonderful HR career. And the result is usually when I leave a company, people are, and I just say this because I'll be interviewing for a job and people say, hey, people are saying you are what HR should be. And I'm not saying that to be arrogant. I'm just saying, that happened to me more than once where people, when the reference is called, people say, Brad's a great guy. You'll love working with him and he's what HR should be.
That's awesome.
And I feel like there is just such a misconception that we have to be that just backstabbing, mean, ignorant person to succeed. And it's not true. It's not. So.
Okay, I'm going to break that apart a little bit. A couple things.
Yep.
And I think you'll really at least understand this. So you can be a leader that people fear, you can be a leader that people respect, or you can be a leader that people trust. And those are huge different levels as far as what engagement you get out of people, the relationship you have with people, what people will say about you when you're gone. So that's huge. And then the idea of being nice again, right? Oh, here's the story. Sorry. Your story reminded me of mine, and I'll just share this because for the benefit of the listeners, because we're going to make a point after this on how not only emotions play a role in work, but how we can react in a more empowered way when emotions are getting heated, right? So here's a quick example. When I was an HR executive, I reported to the CEO, and he had a close family member who worked on our executive team. But, his performance started dropping. So long story short, we were looking to replace this fellow executive. And me being the HR guy, I was in charge of doing that. And again, long story short, there came the day where it says the new employee, this person's replacement is going to start on Monday and it's Friday. We have decisions that must be made. And I've been waiting to get these answers. I've been trying to communicate with my boss and get those, but Friday comes. And I'm an executive, so I made an executive decision to bring it up in the meeting because these things had to be discussed so that we have a good face to show to the new executive, right?
Yeah. That would be beyond awkward, right?
Oh, yeah. So I'm like, oh, goodness.
Jeez, yeah.
So I brought it up and I didn't even finish what I was saying. And my boss got furious. He sends me a message and says, what's wrong with you? What is going on? Yada, yada. And of course, I'm like, okay, well, I tried. So I'm just going to shut up. And I could have been extremely offended. Yes, I was offended. I'm like, really? You asked me to communicate. You asked me to get this done. You want this done. And I'm trying to help you. So why are you mad? And I could have let that sit with me and fester. And I could have gotten a huge grudge. And I could have said, I'm out next week, Yeah. To heck with this kind of thing. But thankfully, I had this emotional understanding. And I thought, okay, why would he be getting so furious towards me when he asked me to do this? Where would his emotions come from? And this is what I understood. He is needing to fire or demote his close family member. That's got to be awkward. Not only awkward for me in that position, but awkward for him because he has to go to family dinners later. And maybe he's been avoiding this situation because it is awkward. He doesn't know how to handle it. He doesn't want to handle it. Therefore, the underlying emotion is fear. And as we often know, anger hides fear. That's how we protect ourselves. And if somebody's going to, push our sensitive spot of fear or this awkward situation, then we're going to say anger towards you, right?
Right.
Anyway, so understanding that, I thought, okay, well, now I can see him as a human, not as jerk.
Right.
And I can say maybe there was reason for him being angry. And let me just see it that way instead of defining him as some evil person that I never want anything to do with again.
Right.
So anyway, I just bring that up because yes, a very heated emotional situation that was very embarrassing and awkward for me. I thought, anyway, from my executive role doing what I knew to be best to I just messed up in front of everybody. And how could that affect me? I decided to understand the emotion and process the emotion so that I could move forward in a logical and controlled way. So go ahead.
I'll say that's great. And it is about how we absorb those emotions, and, my wife tells me it's not about you, a lot of times it's not about us. And I have had a similar experience where I was in an executive meeting and I pointed out, and being kind of new in the role and new in HR, honestly, at that level, I found out something they were doing was technically illegal. And so in this executive meeting, I said to them, this is illegal and I'm not signing my name to this. First of all, that was probably the wrong place to do it. To your point, emotions run high because what's their reaction? You just called me a criminal, basically.
Exactly. Yeah.
Executive team. So they kicked me out of the meeting, said, go to your office, we'll deal with you later. And I was the HR person at that level. And they came later and said, and I literally walked back to my office. I've just lost my job. So I'm sitting in my office waiting to be terminated, basically, by the leadership of the company. But they came in and they said, hey, and I think they let their emotions calm down a little bit too. And they said, we understand, this is an integrity issue for you. We will write a letter saying you were absolved from this. You warned us of the risk or warned us of the issue, and then we'll sign it. But we're not going to discontinue the practice because we don't think it's wrong, because it was one of those illegal but everybody does it type of thing. But anyway, so it worked out great in that I kept my integrity, the nice guy, because I stood up for something I believed in. I didn't roll over. But they said, you do not have to sign those documents. That's our deal. So yeah. I think that turned out right. And I had to keep my emotions under control. Like, I'm going to lose my job. And honestly, kudos to them where they recognized that was an integrity issue for me, an ethics issue for me, and they handled it the way they did. So you're right. With emotions wrapped up, I mean, people say and do things that they normally wouldn't do or say. And I loved your example. It's true, especially you bring family into it, right?
Oh gosh. Yeah, that's
tough. I've also worked for a company that was family based, and that's tough. Professional. So.
Right. So it sounds like we can understand, and I think a majority of people, when they're talking about it from okay, it happened or it wasn't to me, we can understand it from a logical point of view. And we can see, yeah, it makes sense that it was an emotion.
Yeah.
But in the moment, then we think, this is a behavior, this person hates me, I'm defined by this, right? That's where our mind goes because it's protective. Yep. But if we can separate ourselves from and process the emotions, then we can move forward in the proper way. So our examples have been awesome examples of that. And the reason I bring this up in this podcast, how we want to move forward, how we want to grow, but how we have to manage our emotions, it's important because let me ask you this, Brad. In your examples, when you say I have to manage my emotions or I have to keep my emotions in check, does that mean swallow your emotions and just say, well, that didn't really happen, I'll get over it?
No, and as you were talking, I was thinking about this, that this has just been a life lesson for me and a career lesson. You have to take yourself out of it. I mean, look at the situation and the problem and say, is this about me or is this about solving the problem? And to your point, if you take your emotions out of it and take the emotions out of it, you arrive at the right answer. If you don't, if it's about you, if it's about the ego of the executive you're dealing with or ego of the employee that you're dealing with, you do not get to the right answer.
And how have you learned to take the emotions out of it?
Oh, I mean, you take a deep breath. And I am just naturally a mild-mannered person, but I think you really, if someone is berating you, for example, it's really hard to just shut down those emotions, but you just tell yourself what they're saying is not true. This is not true. These are their emotions. If someone is losing it on you and just out of control, then don't react and just say, let them calm down, walk away from the situation. And sometimes getting away from the situation and coming back is the best way to do that when emotions are high.
Okay, so this is important. I'm going to break this apart for the benefit of the listeners. You just gave an example of somebody letting their emotions out on you, right? And then you gave a good example of, okay, let's say it's anger, it's frustration, it's whatever the emotion is. And then we can say, rather than listen to their curse words and their I hate yous and you're a terrible persons, you realize that, okay, they're being angry, they're venting. Let me allow their emotions to get out, and then we can solve the situation. Correct so far?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and then you mentioned in that heated situation, it might be good to go outside and walk around for a little bit, cool off, and then come back, right?
Right.
So the principle of this second example of why you need to go outside and let your emotions, oh, I just gave the answer, let your emotions out. Tell me more about that, why it works and how it's helped you.
So let me just give an example. First of all, if our audience is HR. So if you've worked in HR in any length of time, you've either had to do a termination or you've helped with one, right?
Mhm.
And so an employee that you're letting go, they will call you, sometimes every name in the book. You people are horrible, and you can't react, right? You can't react to that. You just say, hey, sorry, this is, well, I was told early on you can't be sorry, which I disagree with, but we understand you're frustrated, however you react to that, and you keep your emotions in check, and then you go through the process. The employee is let go, and you be as kind as you can through that process. But then when you step away or get home, you step away with your coworkers, and you have to debrief a little bit. You have to, like you just said, some people, I don't know, however your process is to let that emotion go, you have to deal with it. As an HR person, you can't just bottle that up inside. You can't. So it's good to have someone to talk to about it, or whatever your release is, frankly. You have to.
Exactly. So I make this point often, but I have to make it often because it's one of those things that we live most of our lives experiencing emotions, but ignoring emotions, right?
Right.
Especially as HR professionals, because we have to deal with everybody else's emotions, and we have to have so something happened at home. We woke up late, our kid was sick, when traffic was terrible, we get to work. Now we have to deal with the 40 employees that come to our office all day long. We're behind on emails. The CEO now says, well, why haven't you gotten that project done? And you're spending your entire day trying to keep your emotions in check. But there does come a moment where if you don't properly release those emotions, then you're going to overflow, right? It's normal. It is normal, okay? So when somebody feels that way, especially an HR professional who might think, well, I have to be the nice guy. I have to be the perfect HR person who's always smiling and planning the perfect company party, then I can't have emotions. Well, this podcast and this message is for you. We know that you have emotions, but it's important to process them. Now, there are a lot of different ways. It's unique. And we've mentioned a couple. Reach out to somebody, take some time, walk it out. That's using your body, doing some proper exercise, whatever, having some way to release it. And let me tell you, if you find that it's not working for you, or you need some help with how to release that, then that's when you reach out to somebody who understands. That's what I do as a coach. There are a lot of other resources for that, but I highly encourage you to do so. This is part of the reason why I left my HR executive position. I had the emotions. I learned lots about them on how to process them myself, but I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know who could help me and understand me as an HR professional. I had the international experience, but I couldn't find anybody who would really understand that on a similar level. So long story short, that's why I left, so I could be a resource to HR professionals who need that as well. But enough about me.
No, I love that. Can I just say something about that?
Yeah.
That's so true. And, and we say this a lot. I was actually part of I was co-host on a podcast or a webinar with HRCI, and there were several webinars where we talked about this. And as HR professionals, we forget about ourselves sometimes. It's all about giving, and I talk about being good, and we need to do that. But HR professionals really absorb a lot of emotions, like that example I just gave, terminating someone. That is that is hard in many different ways.
Oh, yeah.
They're mad at you. You also feel extremely bad for that person, and you want the best for them. So, I mean, how do you process all those emotions is very important. And I think some HR professionals don't. And I was shocked that I had a friend, a colleague that posted, a couple months ago, hey, people don't realize this about me, but I struggle with this and I'm on medication. I'm letting the world know this is not easy. HR is not easy. And we have emotions to deal with, and that's okay. HR people get to talk about that, but sometimes it's like we're not allowed to, but we should.
Yeah. And to that point where some people, because they don't process their emotions early enough and they let it build, yes, it affects them physically. Then yes, they might have to be on medications. Or what's even more common is people turn to, let's say, addictive behaviors as coping mechanisms. We turn to drinking, we turn to abusing, we turn to mistreating, we turn to self-loathing, and whatever that looks like. So my message of hope to everybody is to say, hey, you have emotions, we get it, but there's a better way. And it's possible to release those and resolve those.
Yeah. And for me, because I don't lash out at people, it's just not my personality. Sometimes I do tend to keep inside, and then you just get overwhelmed and overburdened with things that really, they're not yours to bear. Mm-hmm. So, it is about learning about yourselves. What are your releases? What can you do to really self-talk? You're not what that person's saying you are. That's negative. There's a lot of positivity needs to happen within your own thoughts to get out of that, especially in an HR role, because this. I would walk into a room and everyone would clam up. Here's the HR person, and we don't want to talk to him. We don't want to say anything, and sometimes you feel like you're carrying the plague or something. So it's rough being an HR person.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've had an excellent discussion on reaching your ultimate potential, how emotions play a role. And again, this could be growth with title growth. Okay, as I grow in my career, or it could just be, how am I going to be happy where I am? Not happy all the time, because that's pretending, right?
That's pretending, yeah.
But how can we work through everything that continuously happens and still be healthy, still be fulfilled, still be ready to face everything? So we've had an awesome discussion on that. Brad, my final question for you.
Yes.
From your great perspective, having lots of experience, having worked for HRCI, being in this position of, okay, now I'm writing a book. What do you think is HR's biggest need right now?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I really think that HR has had such a challenge in making that transition from, the admin person doing all the paperwork to now you need to be the business person. You gotta know all the data. You gotta make sure everything you talk about is data, and you gotta be right on point. To now, the transition is a little bit back. Remember back in the day when people say they would make fun of, I don't want to talk about anything warm and fuzzy. Now it's, you got to know the data, but you also have to be warm and fuzzy. You've got to understand people's emotions, like what we've been talking about, Ben. If you are not good at that, if you don't have a balance of all those things, then it's a real challenge, because business leaders need you to be good at the data, good at the business, but they also need you to understand people's emotions, need people how to understand people at work and how to motivate them, how to help them through their problems. Before it was, hey, that person's having this emotional struggle. We just ignored it until they left or something bad happened. And now we've got to be all those things. And that is our biggest challenge right now.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much, Brad. This has been a great discussion, and I appreciate being on the show.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.